Hello from my home to yours, and welcome to the last DevOps for Everyone event of 2020. Before we jump in, I wanted to just say a really big thanks to everybody who's helped get the group to where it is today, currently over 500 members. It's quite incredible. The group was set out, just for those that don't know, to be London-based, to specifically bringing Kubernetes professionals together in London, in the office in Cannon Green. But in March, obviously that all changed when everything went online. Since then, I've had people from the West Coast in the US, Boston, up and down the UK and from across Europe present and speak at these events, and it's been incredible. So big thanks for 2020, and I hope you enjoyed the last session for this year.
All right. Hey, good morning, good evening, everybody. I'm Ritesh Patel from Nirmara, and today I'm going to quickly, start with an introduction of who we are and what we do, and then jump into, KubeCon Recap, how KubeCon was for us, and what kind of interests and activities we saw at KubeCon. So Nirmara is I'm one of the founders of Nirmata. We started Nirmata late 2013, and pretty much early days of containers. And since then, we've been working with mid to large enterprises, helping operationalize containers. Initially, before Kubernetes, it was we had our own solution for management operations of containerized applications. And then in 2017, 2018, we added support for Kubernetes. And since then, we've been actively engaged with, the Kubernetes community, active member of CNCF, and currently engaged and working with several customers, helping them adopt and operationalize Kubernetes. Our focus is mainly around day two operations and management of Kubernetes, starting from cluster lifecycle management, ensuring cluster is configured correctly and ready for applications, and then providing visibility into cluster configuration, ensuring there are no misconfigurations, as well as addressing self-service use cases for developers, so that the operations and the platform teams are not do not become a bottleneck when it comes to enabling developer agility. So that's kind of in a nutshell what our solution delivers. And it's we have our solution is cloud-based with a centralized management plane, and can support clusters, whether they're on-prem or in public cloud. So we support, we can provision clusters as well as onboard existing clusters. So, that's a quick blurb on Nirmata. And let's kind of talk about what we did and what we saw at KubeCon. So some of the use cases we were kind of highlighting at KubeCon, and these are use cases that we've heard from our customers as well as from the broader community, starting with centralized policy management. So, as folks know, Kubernetes is not secure by default, and there's increasing interest in ensuring configuration security in Kubernetes. So we have a solution, and I'll talk about that in more detail in this talk. Some other use cases were around self-service virtual clusters, which is pre-configured secure namespaces on demand, and then secure self-service clusters, where cloud-based clusters, EKS, GKE, can be provisioned on demand securely without developers having to be experts in any of these cloud services. And then provisioning some of the add-on services that are needed to prepare the cluster. So things like security, for Vault, Twistlog, monitoring services, Datadog, logging services. So all of that can be automated, and that's kind of what Nirmata provides out of the box. And more recently, we've added support for rolling out applications across clusters. So as the adoption of clusters is growing, what we are seeing is it's not just a handful of clusters. There are organizations and companies deploying tens or hundreds of clusters, and now they need consistent way to deliver certain applications across these. So there was a lot of interest in that solution as well. So going deeper into policy as code and the policy management capabilities that we showcased at KubeCon. So one of the milestones that we achieved at KubeCon was our policy engine, open source policy engine project was Kyverno was accepted in CNCF by CNCF as a sandbox project. So that just happened a few days before KubeCon, and that was a huge milestone for us because we've been working on this project for about a couple of years, and given the community interest, we were really excited to be part of the CNCF sandbox projects. Kyverno is essentially a policy engine which which allows operators to very easily, using Kubernetes native constructs, block certain configurations that that may not meet your compliance standards. It can be run in audit mode and then enforce mode if those configurations need to be blocked, or you can just scan your configuration and report violations in the cluster. So it's again an open source project. The engine is part of CNCF Sandbox, and Nirmata, our solution, integrates with Kyverno to kind of provide management visibility around policies. So a little bit more detail on Kyverno. It's a controller that sits inside the cluster. It intercepts any requests coming in, basically through it acts as an admission controller and validates and validates requests as they come in, or mutates them depending on how the policies are set up. It's a very lightweight component with a very low footprint, but can handle tons of requests and perform the necessary configuration around it based on the policies. In terms of a little bit more details on how the policies are, like I mentioned, Kyverno is Kubernetes native. So the policies are written as YAMLs, which is very easy for developers or operators who are familiar with Kubernetes. So that was by design, that was on purpose, because other policy engines require the operator to learn different languages, and that there is a steep learning curve. But with Kyverno, what we found is it's very easy because it's Kubernetes native, and it provides the ability to kind of match certain configuration and then act on that configuration based on if it matches, or and the actions could be whether validating, mutating existing configuration, or generating new configuration. Here's a quick example of what the policies look like in Kyverno. Again, very Kubernetes native, very straightforward, easy to grok if you're familiar with Kubernetes. And there's a few, like 20, 30 policies out of the box that are available. So for somebody to get started, it's very straightforward. You don't need to know how to create policies to start using Kyverno and take advantage of all of the capabilities. So the Nirmata is our cloud-based service which integrates with Kyverno and provides a very high level, very kind of enables you to manage Kyverno policies as well as visualize any violations. So it's a graphical interface where you can see at a granular level, whether it's at the cluster level or namespace level, or even at individual pod level, any violations that occur. We classify them as pass or fail or warnings, and then associate a high-level grade to that, so that users or operators can take necessary actions. And these policies, once again, are onboarded as YAMLs, and they can be managed directly and applied to multiple clusters directly from the centralized management interface. So that was a quick overview on what Nirmata did at KubeCon. It was mainly around our activities are focused around Kyverno, which is our policy engine. And in case there's interest in learning more about Nirmata or Kyverno, here are some of the links. I believe the slides will be available after the talk, so we can you can take a look at these and reach out to us if you have any questions or any interest in learning more.
Well, I'm excited to be here with this team and talk a little bit about sort of 3 takeaways from KubeCon 2020. Obviously KubeCon was very different this year, and I think it was hard to stay engaged on certain topics, but we've at Fairwinds have done sort of a recap, and I wanted to kind of share some of the things that we've learned as well. Just a quick note about Fairwinds. Fairwinds is the Kubernetes enablement company. And so we provide kind of 3 different types of offerings. We have services and managed services for managing cloud native infrastructure. We leverage obviously containers and Kubernetes to do that. We're also a big contributor to the Kubernetes open source ecosystem. We've got over about 6 or 7 different open source projects. But many folks might learn about Fairwinds from the Polaris project, which focuses sort of on a configuration validation. And we also have created commercial software that focuses on extending some of the use cases from Polaris, as well as other projects that we've worked on to help integrate configuration validation throughout the lifecycle. What I'll focus on today is a lot of kind of the takeaways from KubeCon, kind of 3 big observations that we saw from the talks. And I'll kind of jump into the first one. I think the first one really just kind of highlights that, Kubernetes is obviously growing, and more companies are racing towards Kube. But the interesting thing is the CNCF, did their annual survey again, and the top 3 challenges kind of still exist. Complexity of Kubernetes is still something that new folks kind of wrangle with. But at the same time, things around cultural changes of moving to containers in Kubernetes is also a problem. I think when we talk to customers, there's a spectrum. There are some companies where they give kind of full access to their application teams to build clusters, manage them on their own, as well as have to own the application development side of things. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's also companies where the platform engineering takes care of everything related to infrastructure in Kube, including maybe even building the Docker image and owning the Helm charts, et cetera. And so I think companies are still trying to find that balance of what works best to balance velocity as well as operational stability. The other kind of key observation that we found was that multi-tenancy use cases seem to be starting to take shape. Especially as companies go from that POC stage of Kube into something that they want to now roll out across multiple teams. And I think this is highlights from a talk that Apple gave around how they enable Kubernetes from multiple platform users, whether it's dev, QA, the SRE side, different teams like machine learning teams. There's a bunch of different types of users who are going to be leveraging Kube, and they might have varying levels of expertise. And so I think companies like Apple and others have been wrangling with how do you build multi-tenancy? How do you deliver things like namespace as a service while still making core services like debugging, monitoring, and logging available? I think this is going to be a big area for the mainstream users when they start leveraging Kube, is getting a handle on how to build out multi-tenant environments. And I'm really excited about some of the innovation that's going on there. The third area that we kind of wanted to kind of highlight is just sort of the role of configuration validation in GitOps. GitOps is obviously becoming sort of a standard for how to, build and deploy Kubernetes infrastructure. But there's still sort of a debate going on around what's the best way to package up and manage configuration. You have tools like Helm and Customize, which, have their own pros and cons and tries to balance, flexibility with, developer friendliness. And I think, we're going to continue to see some more innovation in that area, as well as an increasing importance around validating the configuration of Kubernetes, validating Kubernetes configurations. And it was really interesting to see in one of the talks about where kind of MasterCard integrates different types of testing as part of their process as well. So they're leveraging tools like Sonobuoy and KubeBench in order to validate that their deployments are meeting, organizational policies every time that they ship new config. So those are some of the high level observations that we had at Fairwinds. What I wanted to spend a couple more minutes now around is just sharing a little bit more about who Fairwinds is and how we, are helping our customers address similar types of problems. Just for folks who haven't heard of Fairwinds, we deliver a managed service offering where we build out and manage the Kubernetes clusters for a large number of customers. And what we try to take on is a lot of that complexity around building and maintaining the core services around Kube. So we provide sort of 24/7 monitoring. We take care of sort of the upgrades and the security patching that goes on with certain types of add-ons or certain types of Kube versions that may become vulnerable. And we also connect with our customers over Slack. So we help them with getting their applications onto Kubernetes so that they can kind of realize that time to value and ultimately the promises of Kube. And as part of that offering, we do integrate, we build it all with open source. So we leverage the cloud provider that the customer might be using, as well as all the open source add-ons that run a production grade infrastructure. But we also integrate some of our software, most notably Fairwinds Insights, which really focuses on helping customers run, reliable and secure workloads for their applications. And so with Fairwinds Insights, we provide a number of tools out of the box that address various use cases like container scanning, configuration validation, as well as helping our customers optimize their workloads and resources so that they can run compute more efficiently, as well as meet the performance needs of their apps. And we use this software in conjunction with our managed service to help deliver a holistic offering to customers who are looking to leverage Kubernetes and all the promises of Kubernetes. So with that, if anyone's interested in trying out our software, we do offer a 30-day trial. It's at insights.fairwinds.com. Full 30 days includes policy enforcement tools, as well as container scanning and configuration validation. And we hope to see you there.
Okay, great. So hello, everybody. I'm Sean Wilcox, Senior Vice President of Marketing at Rafael Systems. Nice to be with you. So what I thought I'd do, similar to Joe, is share some of our 3 key takeaways from this year's KubeCon. But first, a little bit about Rafael Systems, in case you're not aware. We provide Kubernetes management solutions for enterprises and service providers running apps across public cloud, data centers, and edge networks. Organizations such as Verizon, U.S. Air Force, Equinix use our solution to efficiently manage their Kubernetes infrastructure across their environments. And when I say solutions, it's really 2 parts. We have what we call a SaaS first product. We say SaaS first because most of our customers use it via the cloud. It's SaaS based, but we do have some customers such as the U.S. Air Force, as you might imagine, that actually use us internally in an air-gapped way. And the second part is operational support and services. So we have a team of certified Kubernetes experts and administrators that help these organizations through their Kubernetes journey. So with that, let's move on to a few key takeaways from KubeCon this year. And so we spent a lot of time talking, well, I guess it wasn't talking, right? It was chatting with attendees at KubeCon and discovered a common thread. And this is something that came up many times in our discussions, and where many organizations seem to be stuck in what I now call the Kubernetes quandary, right? And very simply, 1, 2, 3, it's the fact that Kubernetes obviously has become the de facto standard for managing modern applications and containers. There's a huge opportunity with Kubernetes for organizations to gain efficiencies, innovate faster, and better support their customers. However, as you heard from Ritesh and Joe before me, it's incredibly complex, right? You've got YAML and Helm charts and integration with CI/CD pipelines and security and secrets and networking and logging and monitoring, just to name a few. And finding folks with all of that expertise to get all of that working is obviously difficult. And so sort of first gen DIY solutions are a good training ground in the lab, but require a lot of work and time and resources and expertise as they scale. And so that Kubernetes infrastructure, if you will, is missing a number of critical capabilities that must be built and maintained over time. And as a result, a lot of these Kubernetes projects, if you will, to build that infrastructure tend to slow down. So then the question for us was, why do organizations get stuck now? Why didn't this happen last year, or maybe there's more to come? And so that leads me to our KubeCon takeaway number 2, which is really when you take a step back, and Joe, you touched on this a little bit. Kubernetes is really moving from lab installations to real production environments, right? And the number of clusters are going up as a result. This graph is from a study from the New Stack. I think it was called the State of Kubernetes 2020. It was released in August, and it really shows 2 line graphs here. The top showing the number of organizations that are running 1 to 5 clusters. You can see that steadily going down. And then below that, the number of organizations that they surveyed, which are running 5+ clusters, steadily going up. And so when we talk to folks at KubeCon and we ask them sort of, why is this increase happening? And basically that was the answer, is that they're moving from an internal lab environment where they have 2 or 3 clusters to more complex production environments across hybrid infrastructures and even a bunch of multi-cloud. So when you take, or when you multiply the number of applications by the number of environments across the number of infrastructures that these companies are now needing to support, you very quickly get to 10, 15, 20, 30 clusters. I'm sure I'm speaking with or for most of the panel, when we had a lot of conversations about, yeah, we've got a handful of clusters now, but by the end of 2021, we need to be at 20 or 30 clusters, right? So that's a very different proposition in terms of managing that infrastructure. So there's a big difference between the lab and real production environments across a much more complex infrastructure. So takeaway number 2 is essentially it's the big time for Kubernetes now. These installations are and this infrastructure is now moving to the prime time, if you will, into these production environments. And that takes me to our takeaway number 3, and that's essentially the point that as a result of all this, as a result of moving to production environments, the focus of many organizations are changing, right? It's no longer about how do I upgrade pods and how do I run this command in kubectl. Those are the things that you work out in the lab, right? They're familiar with that now. Now the questions are those production grade or production ready questions, right? Those second order questions. And Ritesh, you talked about sort of day 2 or day 3 questions. That's that's where organizations are now. So, instead of how do I run these commands or how do I best enable X, Y, and Z, it's how do I secure access to my clusters, right? Tesla was in the news earlier this year because of a hack on their Kubernetes infrastructure, right? We will surely, and you mentioned, Joe, that in terms of security being a big theme, it was, and we're going to see more and more of those types of attacks and hacks in 2021, because we're finding that these applications are moving to production anyway, and Kubernetes is kind of being dragged along with it. And so, is it perfectly production ready or perfectly secure as these apps move into production? No, they're not, right? So I think for 2021, it's going to be a bit of a bumpy road in terms of security. So other questions include, right, how do I audit who did what when in kubectl? Right now, it's pretty much open. We talked to several folks about the concept of rogue. Just like there's a rogue IT, a sort of rogue Kubernetes administrators, where you can run any command on kubectl and it's not audited and logged and recorded, by user to determine who did what when. Joe, you talked about GitOps, right? That's a big theme as well that we saw at the show. So how do I leverage this GitOps deployment paradigm, also for Kubernetes? How do I integrate the two? How do I comply with internal regulations and policies? How do I manage on-prem deployments as well as cloud deployments, given different unique specifications for applications? This sort of ties into multi-cloud, where we're finding many companies, they do have, while they want to standardize on-prem maybe and with a single primary cloud provider, there's also, because of specific application requirements, they need to support another cloud, right, for a particular capability. So net, Kubernetes really has to grow up fast, and it is growing fast, but it's going to be a bumpy road. And companies like Rafael Systems and a lot of the companies on this panel and KubeCon as a whole, obviously, are trying to help these organizations, answer these questions now. And last but not least, I want to share the news of a new feature that we launched at KubeCon this year called Zero Trust kubectl Access. For a little background on our solution approach, Rafael provides a SaaS-based controller to our customers to manage their Kubernetes, and thus a single pane of glass for them to manage their fleets of containerized applications and clusters. And so our customers leverage all the benefits of the cloud, and that's inherent in cloud approaches. It's up and running in minutes. It's highly scalable, and over time has a very, very low total cost of ownership compared with do-it-yourself Kubernetes infrastructure solutions. And so the Zero Trust kubectl Access is, as I mentioned, is a new feature and essentially connects kubectl with an organization's single sign-on solution. And thus it enforces role-based access control at the user level and for kubectl commands. So you can allow a certain level of user to execute certain commands or not, all through Zero Trust kubectl Access. And it logs all actions by user for compliance, audit, and regulatory reasons. So just want to give a quick plug to a new feature that we announced at KubeCon this year. And so if anyone is interested in more info about the Zero Trust kubectl Access or any of the 3 key takeaways that I just discussed from KubeCon this year, simply contact us or take a look at docs.rafe.co or visit us at rafe.co. Thank you very much. And Joe, I'll turn it back to you.
So my biggest takeaway from KubeCon is there was an enormous amount of interesting content being talked about and presented, but the event platform kind of sucked. And I think a lot of attendees were just overwhelmed with how much was being presented, as well as just sheer event fatigue this late into the virtual event cycle. So I really appreciate the opportunity a week later to recap what my company Zebrium talked about. My name's Gavin Cohen. I'm VP of Product at Zebrium. And in a nutshell, we talk to vendors, to attendees about how you solve a problem like I'm about to show you. So I'm not going to use slides. I'm actually going to do a demo. And this is what we showed a lot of attendees and got really positive feedback. But in the world of Kubernetes, everything's distributed and sort of abstracted. So what I've done here is I've spun up the Google demo online boutique app, and it all looks great. And then I click on something and boom, right, it's gone. So where do you go from here? How do you solve a problem like this? And the good and the bad news is there are an enormous number of monitoring tools and logging tools and APM tools and tracing tools, and they all give you a different sort of lens into what's going on. But let's start here with my Kiali console, and sure enough, things are broken and down. But again, we know things are broken and down. How do we solve this? And how do we, maybe we can restart everything, it'll all run fine, but how do we get to the root cause? So in Zebrium's world, we have developed some really cool technology. And essentially what we do is we use machine learning on logs and metrics, so that completely unsupervised, just by getting a feed of logs and metrics, we can essentially not just detect that something bad has happened, but also point to its root cause. And it's uncanny just how well it does. So in this example, I actually spun this up yesterday, and I ingested logs and metrics for about 3 hours just to set the scene. There was absolutely no pre-configuration here. So our platform knew nothing about the internals of this online boutique app and all the components that it uses. There were no rules built. There's no pre-knowledge of Redis and Apache and Istio and everything else that was running. Essentially, the only thing it saw, and with nothing pre-configured, was this stream of logs and metrics. So let's pop over to the Zebrium tab, and I'll just go into full screen mode. And what you see here is, this is the period of time that we ingested logs and metrics, and you can see some stats there. So not that much data was ingested, so we actually had very little to work on. And the tech kind of picks out, the events that have error or greater severity, and it, shows you some warnings. And you can see there's a whole bunch of anomalies that it picks out, and that's all derived from the machine learning. But anomalies themselves are not that useful when you're trying to find root cause. So what we do is we use another layer of machine learning that looks for correlations between the anomalies. And this is what yields what we call an incident. So to cut a long story short, our platform detected an incident. And let me click on it and sort of talk you through it. So just to do a bit of a spoiler alert, I broke the online boutique app. That's why it failed. And the way I broke it is I essentially deleted or scaled back one of the services, the product catalog service, so that it killed the pod. But I didn't tell it about that. And as I said, there was no rule to look for that kind of thing. So what you see it found is, this is the time it happened. This is an incident report. The description is really interesting. So what we do is we summarize the relevant log lines into an incident report, and we actually hand it over to the GPT-3 platform, which comes back with some English language text. So the text it derived, which is really interesting, is not human generated. In fact, that line of text doesn't necessarily exist anywhere on the internet. It was actually given back to us by GPT-3, and it kind of nails it, right? But what we also show then are the kind of the logs that had relevant info, and then we show the first event in the sequence of the report, which kind of tells you something terminated, something's not quite right. And then the second one really gives you a much greater sense, that what we call the worst, the one that a human would most likely recognize, which kind of indicates that this product catalog service pod is not running. So now let's drill in. And this is the incident report that I talked about. So this was entirely picked out of those, 300,000 events. This is what our machine learning found as the oddball stuff. And you can kind of see here, this is that first event that we talked about. And then you see that there was a successful delete and the pod was killed. So again, all this product catalog service. again, killing, and now we get this error that you saw. So it's all pulled out by the machine learning, and then the metrics similarly sort of help to reinforce the story. So you can see these were the metrics that it saw anomalies in that correlated with those other log event anomalies. And this is where you see kind of everything running and then suddenly everything dropping down. So it's kind of at exactly this point that the incident occurred. So just to cut a long story short, and then I'm happy to hand back to Joe, what we're doing is we're looking for hotspots of abnormally correlated anomalies across logs and metrics. So essentially it learns the patterns inside all the telemetry that's coming in from your running apps, and then it looks for hotspots of anomalies that stand out as not being coincidental, and that's what it derived here. So I hope that gives you a sense. If anyone's interested in the tech, we'd love to talk to you. We're a early stage startup, but we have quite a lot of production customers now who are seeing this kind of thing every day, completely unsupervised, us being able to detect incidents and root cause. And we'd love you to take a look if you want to visit us at zebrium.com.
So I'm Matt Bates. I'm CTO and co-founder at JetStack. We've been in the Kubernetes ecosystem now for basically the best part of 5 years. We co-founded just after, or not long after, the Kubernetes project started back in sort of 2014, 2015, and we've been involved in that ecosystem ever since. Growing a company from the first couple of us to now over 30 people. Primarily based in the UK, also based out in Europe too. We provide products and services exclusively for Kubernetes and Cloud Native. We've been helping companies of all shapes and sizes, startups, enterprises, to be able to embrace the very positive change that Cloud Native provides and all of the transformation that it enables. And so along the way, we've been able to provide consulting, training, and we now provide around the clock subscription-based support to those customers that require it. Along the way, what's been really important for us is that as we've been learning from customers about their challenges, is that we're able then to build open source. And since the very, very early days of JetStack, we've built open source and contributed it back. We feel that's only right. We're using an open source project. We want to make sure that we give back to the upstream, but also some of our own projects as well. And I think one of the projects that we probably are best known for. One is probably KubeLego. It's a project that was came about in the very early days of the Kubernetes project for automating Let's Encrypt certificates, and that was superseded by a project called Cert Manager, which has been for about 3 years now, and has picked up a huge amount of traction. So I'm not going to use any slides this time. I'm actually going to use browser tabs, and I'm going to point you to some online resources that you can go and read up and find a little bit more about what we do and the project. So Cert Manager, highly popular. You can see if you were to measure a project by its GitHub stars, it's a very popular one. It's being used by vast numbers of end users for automating certificates, and it actually went 1.0 in September. We actually launched the 1.0 version of that, and that's when we sort of started providing effectively stable support. So the API stabilized, and we're able to, as it says there, put that kind of seal of trust on Cert Manager. It didn't use probably in production by a vast number of people prior to that, but again, that gives people the confidence to use it going forward. So fast forward, we're now at version 1.1, and last month, the KubeCon month, we made a number of announcements just to sort of highlight some those for anyone that missed them, perhaps. The big one is that we donated Cert Manager, the project, to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And so the Cert Manager project is now part of the sandbox, which we're incredibly excited about. It's something that we wanted to do for quite some time. And we're now working through the process of putting it in to the foundation. So shortly, things like the repositories will move. It's really exciting for us because what we want to be able to do is kind of further collaborate with the community. Lots of projects in the ecosystem that we're looking forward to working with, including some on the call today. Looking forward to working with Ritesh and team on some of the work that they've been doing in the Kaverno project for policy, and a number of others as well. For anyone that doesn't know what Cert Manager does, it's effectively automated certificate management for cloud native environments. And so we provide the means to be able to automate Let's Encrypt. That's where it's been popularized, but it's actually CA agnostic. And so it's able to plug in other certificate issuers, be it sort of public certificate authorities, or indeed private certificate authorities. So if you're using in a sort of, say, perhaps more enterprise environment, you want to be able to provide your own PKI and plug it in using something perhaps like the likes of Venafi. So that's our parent company that now owns us. We were acquired earlier this year by Venafi and now have their support as we sort of invest in the open source. But there are other issuers too. We're beginning to see a lot of people sort of plug in. It's a really extensible project. Effectively, what does Cert Manager do? Just in a nutshell, for anyone that doesn't know, we build basically on the Kubernetes API. So we introduce a number of resources using the sort of CRDs that have become highly popular now for building and extending the Kubernetes API. And we started using CRDs back in the very early days. They've obviously matured a lot, and we now use some of the latest features of those, validation, defaulting, for instance. But what we provide as an addition is support for certificates. So we make them first-class citizens, if you like, first-class resources in the API, together with a number of kind of supporting resources as well. So what that means effectively is that you can manage certificates, X509 certificates, used for TLS, just like you would sort of like pods and deployments and services, all the kind of built-in resource types in the Kubernetes API. So those native interfaces that everyone's used to, kubectl, the API, and indeed CI/CD, if you're doing sort of infrastructure as code, you can also use that in this kind of way. So effectively, in a nutshell, we kind of extend what Kubernetes does really well, use the power of it, and we introduce certificates and make them resources that you can manage just like you manage everything else effectively. Lots of different use cases. As I said, here are the docs for anyone that's interested. Primarily used for the purposes of ingress, but we are now seeing increasing interest in service mesh. And of course, there was a lot of talk at KubeCon about the various different meshes, and there's a number of them now sort of in the foundation, out of the foundation, coming about, mostly based on Envoy, although there are of course some that are not as well. And this is a pattern that we're seeing with our customers. Lots of interest in what service mesh can provide, but quite often want to be able to plug in security to that, and sometimes that, quite often in fact, that's something that may, like an enterprise PKI, for instance. So lots of different integrations there. If anyone's interested, that's the kind of page to check out on the Cert Manager docs. One thing to point out is we've already started collaborating with some of the CNCF projects. We work, or have been working for some time, with the Kubernetes Upstream project. And so we support the CSR API. So there is support for certificate signing in the Kubernetes API itself. So the Cert Manager project supports those resources, and we've helped to contribute to those as they've made their way into the Upstream API. And we're also working with, and have been working with, the Open Service Mesh project. That's another sandbox project in the CNCF. And I just noted here the support that exists. So if you're wanting to spin up a service mesh, you're wanting to plug in Cert Manager, use the support for all its existing issuers, you can do that today. So one of our engineers added that support, and that's available to anyone today. Lots of different other issuers. Self-signed, you can plug in your own, you can use a CA issuer, you can use Vault to back it, I guess Venafi, both the TPP and cloud offerings there. And we're seeing increasing interest in external issuers as well. And so this is these are effectively issuers, certificate authorities, with code that's outside the main Cert Manager code base. I think probably a couple there that are worth noting. Cloudflare just a few weeks ago announced support for their Origin CA, and so you can plug in using Cloudflare to Cert Manager and have it issue certificates to your ingress, to your services behind your ingress. And also, we've just worked a couple of weeks ago, we announced our support for the Google Cloud Certificate Authority Service. So we've built an external issuer, effectively another Kubernetes controller, that's responsible for working with Google Cloud's new service for providing private PKI. So if that's something that of interest, we've got some blogs here that talk a bit about kind of how that works and how you can use it. So that was a whistle-stop tour through the open source project. Anyone that's interested, certmanager.io, and we're now providing enterprise support. So for anyone that's using that in production, wants some assurance, wants to come and work, have the support direct from the engineering team that's behind the project, we can now provide that stuff around the clock. And so if you visit our webpage, jetstack.io, be sure to help. Thanks everyone.